Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you catch us. This is me back at it again, doing what it is that we do in part on this platform. I'm thankful to good God above that He allows us the opportunity to use the technology and the technologies to do this kind of stuff. And I'm godly pleased and proud to have friends and people who I actually like to be in conversation with about a fair amount of things over the course of the time we have launched this program. And tonight is no different. Tonight is no different. I am pleased to have our brother here with us tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about him. We've known each other. I kind of knew who he was from a distance, but for the last decade plus or more, we've been in close proximity with one another. We served together in the College of Bishops. We are both senior bishops, in this thing called the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. I'm pleased to be partnered in ministry with him. He is also a pastor and a bishop shown up, and with some global connections. I'll let him tell you a little bit about it. But let me tell you what I think is, at least for me, most important. He has a genuine heart for people, and I don't say that about everybody. You can meet some people and you can tell they like people a little bit, but they like themselves a bit more. Hey, yeah. Now you would never say that of them, but you've met those folks. Well, here's a person that I can say, at least in my humble opinion, that cares about people shown enough. And I've watched him courageously gift position. I've watched him courageously take down when he could have stood up. And I've watched him from relatively close proximity carry the mantle of humility, but also somebody that's so smart and has ability to move and act. Let me just bring him to the platform. He is the president and founder and president of Interconnected. Now let me get it right. Interconnected Justice, and I'm gonna let him explain what that is. He is also the Bishop of East Africa for our fellowship, and has started churches, and has planted ministries across the globe. Let me bring to our platform for the first time, not the last, but the first time, Bishop Joseph William Tolton. Come on in the room, brother, and greet our folk.
God bless you, sir. I can't tell you how much that introduction blesses me. It's not often that you are able to be welcomed by a friend and colleague. I consider you both, and you've given me the highest of compliments there, Bishop Seldes. So I thank God for you tonight. Wonderful to be with you and your audience.
Appreciate it, brother. I want to get in. Listen, let me say to you and remind those of you who've not tuned in to us, or who may be watching us for the first time, or who may have not been checking us out over a period of time. We've been talking over the last year, probably this year anyway, about the role and the witness of the prophet in these times. We've also been doing a little bit of jazz, I'll call it, talking through and at least conceiving a way at which those of us in religious spaces and places have some particular perspectives as we think about the current times and moments we're in. We're in an economic moment. We're in a political, of course, moment. We're days away from our national election and a presidential election in particular. We are also in a moment where those of us who would claim some religious perspective, some leadership, huh, and let me be very clear, on the Christian side of town, we have differences of opinions, not just in the context of the denominations we have had, so there's the Methodist version of Christianity in the United States, as opposed to the Presbyterian version of Christianity, as opposed to you and I come out of this similar traditions, Bishop Tolton,
Yes.
classic hardline Black Pentecostalism. So, I'm not talking about those differences, because, those differences have helped to shape us and cultivate us. But we're now having a global conversation about religious, white supremacist religious nationalism that has more to do with culture and context than religion, in my opinion. And the way it's being branded about in such a way. Shout out to Donnie Swaggart, by the way. Shout out to Donnie Swaggart, by the way. And a friend of mine said it best: "Shut up," when it comes to talking about the Black church. But I'll say less. That ain't what we're going to talk about right here. But here we are in this moment, right? And so I would love, as you introduce yourself and the work that you do, I wanted to paint the picture broad, and then you can drive down any lane you should choose, Bishop.
Thank you so much, Bishop Selders. This is truly a remarkable moment that we are living in. And a part of what comforts me is that it is the convergence of so very many different things. The future of African people on the planet and the possibilities for our reconciliation. We are experiencing what the earth is calling for, which is a redress of the grave Mafa, or the experience, the Holocaust that we as African people experience, being kidnapped, stolen, incarcerated, and then transported to the Western Hemisphere. There has never been a full redress. There's never been a full undoing. And at the same time, there's never been a healing for people who were left on the continent, who were separated from us, their kin and their kindred. I don't like to, but I present this story because I think it helps to paint the picture. If there is a couple and they have 10 children and they live with the mother's sister in one home, and in the middle of the night, robbers come in and capture 4 of the children and the auntie, it is not only the 4 kids and the auntie who live with major trauma for the rest of their lives. It is also the 6 children in the couple who also are experiencing a trauma that can only be healed by our reconciliation and our being reunified toward each other. This is what the universe is crying out for. And at the same time, I believe that we're seeing the universe cry out for a new understanding of human sexuality and of gender roles. And much of that is based on our God view, which means that we now have to have an expansive understanding of who God is. And perhaps in our Christian world, we now have to come to an understanding of God and the feminine attributes of God in order for us to really evolve as a society and as a species. All of this is converging at the very same time. And so much of what we see happening in our election is a microcosm of these macro concerns and issues that face us.
You have been one of the leading voices and presence in this, what I'm going to call global conversation with Africa and the diasporic peoples, right? Here in the States, I like to talk about it in terms of both having been to South America. You see us down there. And in fact, a good majority of us came to the Americas vis-a-vis South America, right? So you got the South American influence, the African influence that then comes into the Caribbeans and then into North America. And let's don't forget, Central America has a whole lot of Black people. There's a whole lot of African, African Hondurans, Afro-Mexicans, Afro-Costa Ricans, right? These are all of the influences of the diaspora. Could you say a little bit about the work that you're doing in a kind of Pan-African context, to do just what you just said? Make sure that we're in conversation with.
Absolutely. Just to give some background and some context, I was pastoring a church in Harlem that was a startup, innovative ministry doing the work of outreach to LGBTQ people in particular for the purposes of healing sexuality and spirituality. And then, of course, we know the political work back in 2005, 2006, when I planted ministry, was very focused on the march toward marriage equality and all of the associated and relevant kind of advocacy goals that we had then. I love the work. I thought that this is what I would be blessed to do for the rest of my life. And you, along with me and others, we heard Rachel Maddow reporting about the fact that there was this wild and bizarre "Let's Kill the Gays" bill surfacing in Uganda that just felt very random, but yet somewhat close to us, particularly as Africans, because why in Uganda would this randomly be going on? I was blessed to be invited to meet Bishop Christopher Senyonjo, who was the lone African bishop in Uganda at the time who was standing with the LGBTI community. And when he came to the United States, we had a time to meet. We bonded. We just fellowshipped in ways that felt extremely familiar. You know, when you have that experience, I've met you in a past life for sure. He invited me to Uganda after about a week of being with him because he said, "You'll play well there, and the LGBTI community needs evangelism from a pro-LGBTI Christian perspective." I was incredibly blessed and terrified by the offer, and took him up on it and thought, I'll go to Uganda and praise the Lord, I get back. I'll write a really smart report with some recommendations, and that'll be the end of what would have been a really wonderful experience. As you know well, brother, I went and the whole thing changed my life. I fell in love with the water, the air, the food, the clay, with our people. And truth be told, Bishop, I fell in love with my own Blackness in ways that I had never experienced Blackness before. That I don't think you can experience Blackness in that way outside of being a child of the diaspora whose feet strike Zion, because that's exactly what it was for me. It was that kind of homecoming. And so for many years, I was blessed to do the work of partnering with LGBTI activists on the ground to build affirming worship communities and surround those communities with holistic advocacy propositions. And that work was blessed and profitable. But something deeper, something more expansive was happening in my soul, in my heart, and in my mind during this time period where I was traveling between East Africa and the US doing this work. And what was happening for me was that I realized the degree to which we had been robbed of the possibilities of exploring our identity within the African context and the importance of reunification with our people on the continent. I was just set ablaze in my personal spirit around the degree to which there had been such a theft that we were living in the wake of, but I certainly will testify, I was not aware of the depth of what that separation was and how it is literally theft to have kept people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere separated. The folks you talked about, the Afro-Caribbeans, the Afro-Colombians, the Afro-Brazilians, African Americans, intentionally, we have demonized in this Western Hemisphere, particularly America, all things African. Our Christian faith that was imposed upon us inherently taught us to be afraid of all of the elements of African spirituality that actually would have been liberative for us. Just like we know that in the 1800s and 1804, there were some folks who were enslaved in Haiti having a voodoo worship ceremony. Something happened in the midst of the voodoo. You know, you and I and our grandmother would teach us that the Holy Ghost came in and changed the meeting. Something happened And as a result of what happened in that ceremony, our Haitian brothers and sisters and siblings rose up and were the first Black people to overthrow not just their colonizer, but their slave master. They didn't just beat any army bishop, they beat Napoleon's army. So if Napoleon was the great general, then certainly Jacques Dessalines was the greatest of the great generals. In turn, all things Haitian have been demonized. Haitian religion, Haitian food, the way in which they dress, speak, their attention or sensitivity to matters of health. Haiti has been demonized because Haiti represents Black excellence and it represents Black resistance. We as a Black people have been separated not only from the continent, but from each other. And this separation quickened alive in my heart in very real and strong ways. And that gave me the appetite to build interconnected justice as a Black internationalist pipeline, literally an entity that would connect people of African descent around the continent with those of us across the diaspora, that we might first and foremost choose each other. First and foremost, identify each other and choose each other. Because, of course, part of the narrative and the myth is Africans don't care about African Americans and African Americans have no interest in going home. We set out to defy, to be a part of the ecosystem of Black internationalism that was defying that kind of a myth. And so interconnected justice was built on the premise that we have to unite in order to have the necessary reclamation that is necessary for us to pursue justice globally and in our national context. And that is what interconnected justice is all about, creating a Black internationalist pipeline. And I'll stop there for the moment, but that work, I believe, we are going to see a surge in that kind of global Pan-African consciousness on the other side of this election. Because I think now the picture has been vividly painted. You know, the old Kodak Polaroids that we used to have. You take a Polaroid and you fan it and you'd wait because it was just black at the beginning, but then it just starts to break apart and you see specks of light and the picture breaks through. Well, I think the picture has clearly broken through now, and we know who the Christian nationalists are. The fact that they held a rally replicating Hitler's rally from the 1930s in Madison Square Garden is simply breathtaking, but then had the nerve to have a comedian traffic in overt racist humor. That was not about being funny. That was about trying to bury or camouflage their racism in humor. So we are living at an incredibly interesting and important moment where there is an absolute need for Black folks on the continent and around the diaspora to unite, because we live in a global village. Africa and Russia and the American dominionists in this country are all after Africa's resources, and they are building the infrastructure to annihilate the gains that we made during the civil rights movement, while at the same time, they're playing around in Africa, destabilizing Africa's democracies. Interconnected justice serves as one of the entities that we hope to breathe life into a conversation connecting us, that with unity and strength, intention and determination, we as people of African descent might move as one people under the banner and spirit of Marcus Garvey to further and advance the cause of justice for us everywhere we are.
Boy, I love you for just making the reference of Duty Boukman and Cecile Fatima, who in 1791 had a prayer meeting up in there in Saint-Domingue,
Yes.
close to Saint-Domingue. They were marooned individuals who gathered together, and they had prayer meeting that created the spirit. They called on the God of their ancestors to be with them, while they then took from 1791 to 1804 and ultimately declared their own independence from one of the greatest armies in the world, in France, and beat Napoleon. Let's be clear. Beat Napoleon down, Black people, and that we don't talk of creating the second democracy, if you want a so-called democracy. I'm a parse this a little bit, but United States of America and Haiti.
Yes.
All right, that we don't say enough about, that we don't mention enough. I love that you brought in. I say the beginning work of modern day revolutionary independence. He
That's right.
started there.
That's absolutely right.
He
It's where
started right
that's
there.
where Black Lives Matter started. I love the
Right
women in the
there.
United States who started it, but Black Lives Matter started in 1804. Let's be very clear.
That's it. Let's be very clear about that. That prayer meeting, that Duty Bookman and
Yes.
Cecile Fatima, and I like it that it was they were both spiritual practitioners, man and woman, together did that work. Thank you. I this separation, or this so-called separation of peoples, I have spent the last 20 plus years, in similar ways, struggling and searching and voicing that we are one people separated by histories, right? Not of our own making, if you will, and yet very interestingly, the same peoples. My first trip to the continent about 20 years ago, just shy of 20 years ago, we were at a point on Goree Island. And I was, trying to, have a moment, when you go back to Africa for the first time. We went to Senegal. That was our first trip there. And, you want to, every African American, upon hitting Africa, you want to, you want to go home. And of course, there's a feeling of, homage, sort of, but you're also getting hustled because you're American.
Yes.
Right. So you got to, you're trying to have a moment, but then they, folk trying to buy, trying to get you to buy. And of course, I got some coin. I'm not rich, but they think we are. Mm-hmm. And I came to spend some money here. I want to have me, nice little koofy hat. I want to have the grand boo boo. I want the material. I'm gonna spend all I got, before I go home. And here we are on Goree Island. We're getting ready to go into the slave mansion, and we're in this museum. There's a man who speaking. He said, listen, I was feeling some type of way. I didn't want to be hustled right now. It's go on, bro, go on. I don't want to be mean and or unkind, but I'm feeling some type. We getting ready to go into the slave mansion, and I just. He said, "Oh no!" And he's talking. I don't know what he's talking about. He's talking a little bit of Wolof. It's a little bit of Arabic, and it's a little bit of French. So it was all mixed up in there together. Then he beckoned for me to come, and what they had created in this museum was a wall of the 7 or 8, 9 tribes of people that make up Senegal. And this is what we don't understand. That while these arbitrary lines draw out these countries that have much more to do with Europe, and who was the colonizing country of who, 8, 9, 10 tribes of peoples that make up the country of Senegal. And here was a group of people. He said, and he pointed to these people, and then I began to cry. Because what he could observe in seeing me, that I didn't know until I saw them.
Yes.
But them people look like my grandfather. They look like my people. That look like Big Mama and them. That look like Boley and them. That look just like, and I was looking at, oh my God, that he could see, and as Africans can, they can tell what tribe you from, probably your people and all of that. And that was kind of my first kind of real experience of we are one people, separated by the miles. And so it was very clear to me the conversations that we ought to have are conversations not through white people, not curated by white people, but conversations Africans to Africans. right?
Yes.
And Africans here, just as much as we say the strongest, the brightest survived the great Mayaffa,
Yes.
got here. The strongest and the smartest were able to survive that. Many of us, some would say 2/3 of us, died on the way here.
That's right.
But those who did come from Africa to the West, to the Americas, South Central Caribbean, and North America, ultimately survived because we were the determinants. We were determined to be here for our people. But Africa lost the best, the brightest, the smartest, the strongest, if that is true. Now, I'm not suggesting what's true or not true, but I'm suggesting that while there was a sacrifice, of course, on this side of the water, there was a sacrifice on that side of the water. And what I purpose to do for the remainder of my life is to make sure we're in conversation with one another about what was lost. But yes, we don't have land, we don't have language, we have a perpetual sense of abandonment and loss. They have that. But what they don't have is what they don't even know our stories of resilience. They don't know our story of struggle. They don't know my big mama's struggle, who went to the 7th grade and had to raise. She was a twin, the oldest two twins of 11 children who she had to raise because her mother died in childbirth of their youngest baby brother. Right, that was my maternal grandmother's story. Just for an example, that my story is not unique to any of our other stories. They don't know our stories. They don't know what we've had to go, and we don't know theirs.
That's right.
Right, and so there's a sense of familial journeying, just storytelling, just a connection, of human connection. And let me just say this, just for the record: Africa birthed Christianity. How dare Christians somehow or another think Africa didn't know anything about what Christianity was. It boggles my mind. They forget Jesus and the first family, when Herod the Lesser was looking for him, they didn't go to Europe. They didn't go, no. And the first churches, we would call churches, were in Africa.
That's right.
So it boggles my mind that somehow or another 200 and some odd years later, we're still trying to colonize, missionize, and some of us thought, how arbitrary. Uganda? Y'all going for gay folk and you what? Yeah. And then when you take a look, you find out what. And when I turned on the social media and saw all of these little bitty TD Jakes running around Africa.
Yeah.
Right. So then it became clear something going on here that we got to have a conversation about. Not the brilliance of what Africans in their sojourn here in the Americas created. I mean, so Lukumbi. And hoodoo for us, and all of our versions of Pentecostal Christianity. That's got the same elements in there.
That's right.
You hear them singing songs, and I hear the choirs of our youth, and the metered hymns of the South. I hear that tonnage of testimony service when you didn't have when the musician was late. When the pianister, that's what they called it in my church, the pianister. When the pianister was late and wasn't no organ, we had some drums and some harmonies and the foot tapping on the wood floor of them churches we were in, the buildings we were in, that created a sound that I hear when I hear Africans sing. It's the same sound. I don't know what they're saying, but I know what it is that they're expressing, because I know what that tone sounds like. So anyway, you done got me I'm all stirred up.
Amen. It's good. It's real. It's true, brother.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how your interconnected justice is really one of these places where um, the connection, you're really working on the connection between the peoples of the Americas and the peoples of Africa. In not just well, say more about what your current work specifically is destined for, and yeah, say more. Just say more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The legacy of imperialism and anti-Blackness that has resulted from the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism continue to be very operational today. And this methodology of exploitation, it remains the same. They are in pursuit of economic domination powered by political violence and a corrupt version of Christianity that creates a very sinister existential or mystical distraction. Back in the 1400s, we had the doctrine of discovery, which was, of course, an edict from the Pope to the King of Portugal, essentially mandating that the Europeans go out and conquer pagans and those that were unbelievers, subdue them in their possessions, movable and immovable, and of course, make them enslaved in perpetuity. Well, that system, that usage of a perverted theology to drive a perverse economic agenda is very much so alive and with us today. And I think we really do ourselves justice when we're able to focus on the fact that economics was the motive, but the Christian faith was the vehicle. And so these things are completely intertwined. And that's exactly what's happening today. In order to power technology, as you know very well, brother, we have to build these devices that we all live on. And one of the core, literal, natural resources that is foundationally necessary for these devices is cobalt. 75% of the world's cobalt deposit is found in one country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Let me say that again. 75% of the world's cobalt deposit is found in one country called the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There are $34 trillion worth of resources under the Congo, within the ground of the Congo alone. There's enough money there to feed all of Africa and all of the diaspora. Putin knows it. Xi Jinping knows it. The Dominionists in America know it. They want access. So they partner with autocrats who are willing to then manufacture these crusades of mass panic around matters of human sexuality, because what they serve up to the African populations who are economically disenfranchised and politically disenfranchised, they serve up an enemy that they can defeat. They can dig their teeth into their fight against LGBTI people, against abortion, and really against women's equality. And so while they've got the people ginned up and in that boxing arena, duking it out, and mothers and fathers ashamed of their own children, and communities ashamed of the sons and daughters that used to not be born to a nuclear family, but in Africa, you were born to the community. And so they have intentionally dismantled the ethics of Ubuntu, and they have set Africans on a course so that these culture wars that are imposed from America essentially become Africans' kind of primary social and political concern while the country is looted. And so a part of the work of interconnected justice is, or our core work, is building a council of affirming elders from the United States and from across several countries in Africa, who will work together and create an interlocked network. And the network unto itself can stand up and speak truth to power at a grass tops level, and then be connected to a grassroots movement machine that is actually able to take those edicts and pronouncements and directives coming from the grass tops, re-articulate them at the grassroots level in ways that make sense, and then take those solutions to their local communities. And this is not just about African Americans partnering with Africans to save Africa, because these same dominionists are at work here in the United States. It is the extreme religious right, number one, that cooked up the MAGA movement many, many years ago and created the blueprint and the design for Trump. But in America, these same actors are dismantling the American civil rights infrastructure, dismantling voting rights, creating mass access to guns in our community, promoting the heavy policing of Black bodies. They are behind the campaign to erase the truth of the Black experience. They have fully criminalized and demonized DEI programs. They're driving the Christianization of public education, criminalizing reproductive options, and demonizing trans people. And both the reproductive issues and the demonization of trans people have a very particular impact on cisgendered Black women as well as transgender Black women. So the Dominionists have two theaters where they're engaging war, in my mind, attacking the life, the well-being, the bodies, and the resources, and the future potential of Black bodies. And so what Interconnected Justice is doing with our Council of Elders is putting together a Pan-African group of leaders that will now rise up and address these issues head on. And let me just end by saying 3 weeks ago, Wall Street Journal, please Google it, blockbuster reporting, which showed very clearly how the Kremlin, African autocrats, and American right-wing evangelicals are working together to foment these anti-LGBT legislative campaigns across Africa, all in the interest of distracting Africans and using those laws as cudgels to dismantle and crush African democracy, which we know is already tenuous.
It's not gotten by some of us that the Congo and the various different Congos, there's several of them now. There's
That's
several.
Right.
The Central Congo, there's the Republic of the Congo. They're in civil war.
That's right. That's right, brother.
Where there is, so do yourselves a favor, folks. Check where there is political destabilization, whether that is in Central Africa, East Africa, check Ethiopia, the North, and the warring that has gone on there. You can name 10, 12, 15 nations in Africa, let alone what's happening in Brazil and Peru, what's happening in Honduras,
Yes.
and in the what they call the triplet, the tri-state region of Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, the civil unrest that's happening in Haiti.
Yes.
They won't let Haiti be let alone to save nobody's life in Haiti. Where there is political destabilization, you're going to find the interest of these folk you just named, these very wealthy, very rich, with Russia and China involved. I have occasion to have had a student who was part Black and part Chinese, and interesting, you know. And I got to know this student at one point, and he began to talk about, his mother's from China, his father's from Africa, and he grew up in Africa, and I began to see, and the interest, the building, the infrastructure,
yes,
that's being negotiated.
That's right.
The money that's flowing from Asia, and I'm largely talking about China. The deals that are getting cut, right? The folk, and then the religiosity it's framed in, right? There's a direct corollary, and we've seen it before. We've fought a civil war in this country 160 years ago. It was supposed to be states' rights. That's what they, when within a generation, within 20 years, civil war ended in 1865. 30 years later, 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal.
Yes.
Emerged as the legal law of the land vis-a-vis the Supreme Court, that it took another 60 years for us to kind of get right. We fought a civil war, and it took 100 years for the Civil War to get implemented fully. Okay. All right. Yeah. Some of us do reads. I'm gonna say it just like that. I'm gonna say it just like that. All right. If you are, yeah, our brother James Baldwin said it this way: to be black and relatively conscious
Yes.
is to live in a state of rage.
Yes.
You know,
That's right.
is to be upset. I'm turned up a little bit because to look at how this is playing out, this ain't no new story. Make America Great Again was a trope used in the 1880s and 90s. Right. What are y'all talking about?
That's
okay,
right.
okay,
That's right.
okay. And of course, when you say America Great Again, that means, you know, before 1865, black folk didn't even have no, we were still 3/5 human legally, right? So I don't know. I would that we would, as you have suggested, that we would spend some time really unearthing for ourselves, unpacking what this actually means. And it ain't no real deep, heavy lift, in my opinion.
Right.
All right, to kind of sort through it all, and then you know, whose side on your own? I mean, you know, I'm leaning on the Lord's side. I'm gonna just say it that way, so that we say it within in the lane of churchy. But and yet, you know, some of our liberation theologians, and I'm thinking about Gustavo in particular, who just made transition. It is unimaginable that here we are again, 200 some odd years after the so-called Civil War.
Yes.
Here we are again, really, you know, with these interests of gender and race at the center of this election. Now, and with religion ruling the nest, calling the shots. And people who are, I'm gonna just say less right there. I'm gonna just say less. I don't want them blocking me from these airways. But it's. I'm calling, at least in part, for us to really think about what it is that we do as we move to the ballot. As many of us, millions of us, have already done so. And Lord, give me strength. I'm gonna head there. I'm gonna head there in a day or two, and make my voice, you know, tally, you know, what it is I need to say, and participate, because I do feel the blood of my ancestors boiling in my veins.
Yes, and well, we should, because Jeffersonian democracy didn't happen until Selma. It didn't happen until Auburn, New York, where women got the right to vote. So it was because of the blood of our ancestors that was shed that Jeffersonian democracy was actually able to become the reality that the forefathers envisioned, at least theoretically. And so when we talk about January 6th and people want to muzzle and silence us and tell us to just get over it, you are essentially asking us to disregard the blood and the sacrifice of our ancestors. And I believe if we put it into Christological terms, Paul says that we're essentially saying, shall we crucify him again? How can we do this to our very own ancestors who gave their lives so that this nation might actually come into the idea of America, which is a beautiful political concept? Our execution has been incredibly imperfect, but it is because of our experience as the marginalized of the marginalized that we have been the conscience of the nation. And I believe it is our destiny to continue to be so, although that will take a revival of Black consciousness, which will also mean a restoration of our Black culture. And we will need to see the emergence of those in that cultural space who have an ear, a heart, and an eye, and a burden for a Black consciousness sensibility. Unfortunately, that whole kind of Diddy movement had an incredible blind spot around any music that would speak to activism because they were so swept up and grounded by other values.
And we have a few more minutes left. I'd like to turn to that if we could for a moment. And of course, you have to promise me we make some more time to continue this
Yes,
dialogue.
yes.
All right. There is, for me, an important thing you raised here. I too have interest and a very real fundamental theological and episcopal connection to Garvey. My consecration comes through, as you know, comes through the African Orthodox Church.
Yes.
Its founder was George Alexander McGuire, who was the Secretary General for Spiritual Things in the UNIA.
Mm.
And it was the spiritual arm, the church arm of Marcus Garvey's movement. And so the connection, this kind of Pan-African connection, was very important as we understood ourselves, both as a people and as a spirit people, but also as a political force. Because I would submit to you, the network that the UNIA created was the beginning, and the network that the Urban League and NAACP walked right in. There were chapters and chapters and chapters of the United Negro Improvement Association all across this country. Malcolm's father and mother were leaders in the UNIA movement. He got liberation honestly, right? You know, he is the lineage of those who came in before, dad being a Christian preacher, but also a leader in the UNIA. I think he understood that we needed to create power at the local level, that we needed to stir within ourselves and get activated, using our faith as a guide, or at least some guideposts, right? Taking seriously what it means to have moral voice and moral authority. I wonder, might we sit here for a moment and grapple with so interconnectedness. There's Africa at the root of that, right? But there's justice, right? There's a call for that, which for me, justice is this clearly. There's some things that are just right.
Right.
And then there's just some things that are just wrong.
Yes.
Right. And you don't have, it's like that book, that chapter in Scripture in Acts. You don't have no need of anybody to teach you. You don't have no need of it. That right and wrong, I think you can sort that out, right?
Yes.
It is how do we, in plain speak, somehow communicate that so that we convince others that what's right has something to do fundamentally with what comes from within to out, as well as what comes from without that you bring in.
That's right. That's right. There is no question about that. We forget that Garveyism, Marcus Garvey, and let's be very clear that his wives, he had a first and a second wife who both happened to be named Amy, were extremely instrumental. So I want to locate the women who were more than just the power behind the throne. He was deeply guided by a sense of spirituality. And the UNIA that you know, I'm loving this, brother. United Negro Improvement Association. Garvey built that upon scripture. The text was Psalm 68:31, where the Bible says that princes shall come forth out of Egypt. Ethiopia soon shall stretch forth her hands unto God. Marcus Garvey understood that we were one people coming out of very many different places, and that we did have to create Pan-African power, but the intelligence of Garvey was to build the chapters that you spoke to, because he also understood local power and local implementation. He understood that racism was racism, but that it did come in its unique formulas based on what our particular context was. And he wanted us to build those two levels of power, a Pan-African unified experience, but he also wanted us to build power on the ground in our local economies, that we actually might have a seat at the table, or in many instances, of course, it was about let's build our own table. which is why he was a driver of the perhaps we need to go back to Africa movement. Now, I think we can argue about whether strategically he ever believed we would do that, or if in fact that was a strategy that he employed because he understood that he needed to kind of use that as the ace in the hole to push white folk around matters of justice and equality in the Western Hemisphere where we are. But he understood the need for those different levels of power. He understood the need for us to be clear about where we're unique, but to be far more excited and animated about the places where we are the same.
I am so very clear as a student of history like you that I read history as a way, at least using history as one set of lenses, if you will, to interpret how folk moved in that time, so that we might get some indication and learn from both what they did well and what they maybe didn't do so well, in order for us to understand what it is that we need to do now. What is it that is the work of our hands today? It is clear to me that the kind of democratic republic that we, representative form of governance that we have today is on tap. It is being threatened by a kind of totalitarianism. I'm getting that all twisted up because I'm tired and it's late. But that centers on the charisma of a one-centered personality, right? That then is replicated, so that you have little bitty folk in all of these little races around, right? Where what used to be one side of the aisle now looks so very different than that side of the aisle looked 20, 30 years ago, right? And certainly that side of the aisle, that when I was growing up, you had blacks on both sides. You had folk who represented, say, hey, I'm for our people and we need to be everywhere. That made sense, in a particular time and day. Today, I was just counting this up. I have two friends who are running for president in this election cycle. Two friends two folk I know personally, know me by name, I know them by name, right? Have eaten broken bread together, have had spent time, and I can't vote for neither one of them because the stakes are, anyway. In this moment, what would you say, as a kind of closing word, brother? What would you say is important to hold on to as we enter into these last few days? We're, essentially a week away from this election, and let me just say it, in my opinion, we probably won't know the outcome of it, for a number of days afterwards, ultimately. However, that I think, this is, one of these elections, I know said of every election, is the most important one of our lives, but this might be this might have some significance for our what's next. What would you say in this moment, the work that you've been doing in a global context, especially as it relates to Africa, and your work for justice amongst our people? What would you say in this moment to folks who will view this and who are watching tonight?
Well, let me echo you. I do think that the fact that we have been saying for some time, every 4 years, that election is the most important, is undermining the truth of the fact that this is the most important election probably in the history of the country, certainly since the Civil War. What I think is really important, and that I hope our people internalize, is that there's the vote and then there's going to be a reckoning. It is critically important that you get out there and that you vote, and that you vote for the person who mirrors your values, your sense of character, and for whom has presented a vision of the country that is far more in line with your own perspective than the other. And so I encourage everybody to get out there and to vote. After the vote, there is going to be a reckoning. And I pray that our people take hope and take courage and take a vow to be equally as committed to pulling the lever in a few days as they are to being a part of a sustained and ongoing movement that is going to demand a reckoning. You cannot stand in Madison Square Garden and joke about hanging out with, or and joke about, is that your black friend you see over there with a lampshade on his head? Oh, I'm just joking. I really like that guy. We actually ate watermelon together the other night. This is what the very same comedian who said that there is an island that is an island of garbage floating in the Caribbean, I think we call it Puerto Rico, said. These, not just these comments, but those comments which are reflective of an ideology that is seeking to capture the soul of this nation, there will be a reckoning. Take courage, our souls. Let us journey on. For the night may be dark, but it won't be very long. After the vote, a reckoning is coming.
I want to, as a way to kind of cap, I was called to remember words from one of my spiritual teachers, Howard Thurman.
Yes.
Howard Thurman in Meditations of the Heart, and in a piece he entitled "Strength to Be Free." He said this: "Give me the strength to be free. For often to be free means the ability to deal with the realities of one's situation as to not to become overwhelmed by them. It is the manifestation of a quality of being and living that results not only from understanding of one's situation, but also from the wisdom in dealing with that situation. It takes no strength to give up, to accept shackles of circumstance so that they become shackles of soul, to shrug the shoulders in bland acquiescence. This is easy," he says, but do not congratulate yourself that you have solved anything with the easy. In simple language, you have sold out, surrendered, given up. It takes strength to affirm the high prerogative of your spirit. And you will find that if you do so, a host of invisible angels will wing to your defense. And the glory of the living God will envelop your surroundings, because in you, God has come into his own self. I'm a preacher, and on this platform,
how about that?
Preach when I want to. Hey, listen. It's for me. That's how it theory. Give me the strength to be free. And all of what we said tonight, I think that kind of note of freedom and is beating there. You know, I hear Martin in that last speech. Mine eyes have seen the coming of the glory, right? That God's truth is marching.
Yes.
Woo! So don't journey on. Don't you got to journey on. I think there's a great deal of hope even while I despair. I was in a session yesterday as we were in a visual talking about what's happening in Gaza, our sisters and brothers there, the struggle that is going on there, the continued struggle of our brothers and sisters in Haiti. The Congo is turned up, and you hear nothing in our current media, nothing about what's happening in Central Africa, right? At the heart of Africa. And you named it clearly. It's about that. It's about those minerals and those resources, that cobalt, right? And you hear nothing about what's happening in South America and in Central America. We hear about the border stuff, and I find that just absolutely ridiculous, because that border has only been there since we helped to create it. That's a natural flow, that's between. Anyway, I can't get into that because my blood pressure go right through the roof on it. And who is a citizen of a state? What's that? If that's not about domination. And anyway, I can't. We ain't got no more time. Listen, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank
For
you,
the relationship that you and I have, the ways in which we've been able to connect.
Yes.
Secondly, thank you for lifting up these concerns that are important to you, that you have launched out into the deep. I'll say it in that way. To forge some new realities and to the networks that were created 100 years before us, right? Marshall Garvey and the Garvey movement did this work of Pan-Africanism, and even those before that. I mean, Edward Blyden and Alexander Crummell. I can call that role as well, of those who were thinking about Africa. Henry McNeil Turner, all right, and the great Africans of the African Methodist Episcopal Church who were doing the work in Africa, trying to. They weren't Christianizing. They were saying we the same peoples. Right? Let's reconnect us as peoples. I look forward to the opportunity we have to continue one conversation, but two, the building of the work. I appreciate you, and I echo what you've just said. You got to you got to go vote. And folks, listen. Let me tell you what we're gonna do for this next few days. I'm going on. I'm having some specials this week, and we're gonna talk about the stuff that need to be talked about over the next few days as we lead us to not only the vote but the aftermath of the vote. It's how do we navigate? What did you say, Bishop? How did you categorize that? What we do after the vote?
After the vote, there will be a
reckoning. Oh my God. All right. Listen, family. Listen. Thank you, Bishop, for this opportunity that you give of your time. Family, we will be back at you again in a few days, talking to some of my friends and people that to have these kinds of conversations. I call them relevant, courageous conversations. Thank you very much. We'll holler at you. Peace. See ya.